If you grew up anywhere near a radio in the 70s or 80s, you couldn't escape his voice. Willie Nelson wasn't just a country singer, he was an icon, braided hair, battered guitar, and a rebel soul that redefined American music. His songs weren't background noise. They were national anthems of love, loss, and freedom. Fans swore he was untouchable. That's why today, looking at where he is and what his life has become feels almost surreal. How did one of the most beloved figures in music history end up here? The truth will shock you. Willie Hugh Nelson was born in Abbott, Texas in 1933 during the hard years of the Great Depression. His parents split early, leaving him and his sister Bobby to be raised by their grandparents. Music wasn't a hobby in that tiny town, it was survival. Their grandfather bought them instruments, and before long, Willie was strumming a guitar while Bobby played piano in the family's gospel group. It was rural, it was poor, but it was rich in sound. Neighbors remembered hearing the Nelson kids playing on porches, filling hot Texas nights with hymns and honky-tonk. Willie wrote his first song at the age of 7, and by 10 he was performing at local dances. These weren't glamorous stages. They were dusty VFW halls and church gatherings, where the air was thick with smoke and sweat. Yet people felt something. His voice had a raw ache in it, as if he was carrying the weight of the land itself. In school, Willie stood out, not for grades, but for the way he always carried his guitar. Teachers said he'd drift into songs mid-lesson, scribbling lyrics on the margins of his notebooks. By high school, he was a radio DJ, spinning Hank Williams records by day and gigging in rough bars at night. This was the 1940s, when country music was still regional, but Willie's style already hinted at something more. After a brief, unsatisfying stint in the Air Force and a series of odd jobs, including door-to-door encyclopedia sales, Willie couldn't escape the pull of music. He packed up, drove to Nashville, and threw himself into the bustling scene. Nashville in the 1950s was unforgiving. Hundreds of dreamers chased the same spotlight, and Willie struggled. He worked as a songwriter, selling songs for next to nothing. But his pen was gold. He wrote Crazy, the torch song that Patsy Cline turned into one of the most iconic ballads of all time. He wrote Hello Walls, which became a smash hit for Farron Young, and Nightlife, recorded by Ray Price. The irony? While others were turning his songs into chart toppers, Willie himself was still broke, hustling from studio to studio. Yet fans didn't just hear Willie's songs on the radio, they felt them. They played Crazy at heartbreak moments, slow danced to Hello Walls, and drowned sorrows in jukebox corners with Nightlife. His words slipped into everyday life, quietly making him one of the most important voices in country music, even if his own voice wasn't yet front and center. By the late 1960s, frustrated with Nashville's rigid sound, Willie returned to Texas. It was there, in the beer-soaked honky-tonks of Austin, that he found his people. Crowds weren't looking for polished pop country. They wanted truth. They wanted grit. And that's exactly what Willie delivered. With his long hair, his worn guitar, nicknamed Trigger, and his soft, conversational singing style, he became a symbol of rebellion against the slick Nashville machine. Fans embraced him not just as a musician, but as a folk hero. The rise wasn't just about talent, it was about timing. America was changing. Vietnam protests, the counterculture movement, a restless youth searching for authenticity. Willie Nelson, the quiet Texan with a poet's pen and a rebel's look, became their unlikely prophet. By the 1970s, Willie Nelson was no longer just a songwriter in the shadows. He had become the face of a revolution in country music. The Nashville establishment had been pushing a polished, almost pop-friendly sound, but Willie, alongside friends like Waylon Jennings, was carving out something rawer, freer, and more honest. They called it outlaw country. It was a movement, but it was also a lifestyle. Fans saw the braids, the beard, the worn jeans, and the guitar covered in scars. Willie looked nothing like the rhinestone-clad stars of Nashville, and that's exactly why people loved him. He wasn't a product, he was real. The breakthrough came with albums like Shotgun Willie, 1973, Red-Headed Stranger, 1975, and Stardust, 1978. Each one hit like a cultural shockwave. Red-Headed Stranger in particular, with its sparse production and haunting storytelling, was unlike anything on the radio at the time. Critics thought it was too bare, Too odd. Fans proved them wrong. The album went multi-platinum. And then there was Stardust. Willie, the supposed outlaw, decided to record an album of American pop standard songs like Georgia on My Mind and Blue Skies. Nashville executives thought it was career suicide. Instead, it became one of his best-selling works, staying on the Billboard country chart for a staggering 10 years. The numbers told one-story platinum albums, #1 singles, Grammy Awards. But the fan reaction told an even bigger one. His concerts weren't just shows, they were pilgrimages. Crowds of tens of thousands filled stadiums, swaying together as Willie sang On the Road Again, a song that became an anthem not just for travelers, but for anyone chasing freedom. Fans wore his braids. They bought bandanas just to tie them the way he did. His image was everywhere, posters on dorm walls, shirts at gas stations, his name scribbled in high school yearbooks. He wasn't just a country star, he was woven into American culture. Willie's tours became legendary. He didn't just play music, he created community. His annual 4th of July picnic concerts in Texas drew massive crowds, mixing bikers, hippies, farmers, and families into one wild, sweaty celebration of music and rebellion. There were no boundaries at a Willie Nelson show, just the music, the smoke in the air, and the feeling that everyone belonged. Hollywood came calling too. Willie starred in movies like Honeysuckle Rose and appeared in The Electric Horseman alongside Robert Redford and Jane Fonda. To fans, it felt like he was everywhere. TV, film, radio, stadiums. He was untouchable. And then came the cultural crossover moment. Willie teamed up with Julio Iglesias for To All the Girls I've Loved Before. The unlikely duet stormed international charts, proving that Willie Nelson wasn't confined to Texas bars or Nashville charts. He was a global figure. By the early 1980s, he was at the peak of his powers. Albums going gold and platinum, sold-out arenas, a household name known by kids, parents, and grandparents alike. He had become larger than life. But with great peaks come steep cliffs. Behind the braids and the outlaw smile, trouble was already brewing. For fans, the 1980s felt like Willie could do no wrong. He was everywhere on the radio, in movies, even in commercials. But behind the scenes, a storm was building. It wasn't drugs or scandalous affairs that threatened him most. It was something more mundane, but ultimately more devastating. Money. In 1990, the unthinkable happened. The Internal Revenue Service came knocking. Willie Nelson, the man who seemed larger than life, was suddenly crushed under a staggering $32 million tax debt. The number was shocking, almost unbelievable. Fans who had danced to On the Road Again were stunned to hear that the government was now on his road, taking nearly everything he owned. The IRS swooped in, seizing properties, ranches, recording studios, even personal memorabilia. For longtime fans, it was like watching an American folk hero stripped bare. The image of agents carting off Willie's belongings burned into the public imagination. People didn't just see a star in trouble, they saw a national treasure humiliated. And then came the music industry whispers. Had he mismanaged his money? Had advisors cheated him? For fans, the details didn't matter as much as the shock. This was Willie Nelson, the outlaw, the rebel, the man who stood above the system. And now the system had him pinned. On top of that, Willie's health was beginning to falter. Years of touring, the relentless pace, and heavy smoking left him looking older than his years. He was still playing shows, but the energy wasn't the same. Some critics began to ask if the outlaw era was finally ending. For many fans, it felt like losing a piece of their youth. The man who had symbolized freedom and rebellion was now caught in the most ordinary of trap stacks debt. It was shocking, disorienting. How could someone who had given so much joy, who seemed so untouchable, be brought down by paperwork and accountants? And yet, through it all, Willie didn't hide. He didn't lash out. He did what he always did, he turned to music. But the aura of invincibility was gone. The fall had come, and fans everywhere felt the sting. The news of Willie's downfall spread like wildfire. Newspapers ran headlines about his colossal tax debt, and television clips showed government agents seizing his beloved ranch. For fans, it felt unreal. How could the same man who sang about endless highways and freedom be cornered like this? Willie, ever the survivor, did something no one expected. Instead of hiding in shame, he leaned into the crisis with his trademark wit. In '91, he released an album with a tongue-in-cheek title, The IRS Tapes, Who'll Buy My Memories. The concept was as bizarre as it was bold. He sold the album through late-night TV commercials, promising that the money would go directly to paying off his tax debt. For many fans, it turned tragedy into a rallying cry. Buying the album wasn't just about music, it was about helping Willie get back on his feet. But despite the humor, the damage was real. His possessions were gone, his finances shattered. Concerts continued, but there was a new edge to them. Fans cheered louder, almost out of defiance. They weren't just watching a country star, they were watching a man claw his way back from humiliation. Still, the mystery deepened. Willie had been omnipresent during his peak on TV, in films, on magazine covers. Now his appearances grew rarer. The outlaw image gave way to something quieter, more fragile. Reporters asked, had his time passed? Could he ever return to the towering figure he once was? The 1990s were uneven years. Willie kept recording, but his albums didn't dominate charts the way they once had. He remained a touring workhorse, but the spotlight shifted toward younger stars. To longtime fans, it was unsettling. The man who had defined an era seemed to fade into the background of the very genre he had revolutionized. Yet in a strange way, his partial disappearance added to the myth. People whispered about him living simply, playing small shows, keeping out of the limelight. Where did he go? Fans asked. How could someone who once filled stadiums just vanish? And in those quieter years, Willie Nelson transformed from a superstar into something rarer, a legend in exile. His absence wasn't just silence, it was a haunting reminder of how fleeting fame could be, and how even giants could stumble into shadows. It almost defies belief. Willie Nelson, the outlaw who once stood untouchable at the top of American music, is now in his 90s. His braided hair has thinned, his frame has shrunk, and his face carries the deep lines of a man who has lived 1,000 lives. Yet when fans see him step onto a stage, guitar trigger in hand, the electricity is still there. Today, Willie lives quietly on a ranch in Texas, far removed from the chaos of his peak years. His lifestyle is simple, almost monastic, centered on family, his music, and a small circle of trusted friends. For longtime fans, it's hard to reconcile. The same man who once sold out stadiums around the world now spends many days in solitude, surrounded by fields and animals instead of screaming crowds. But Willie has never stopped working. Incredibly, he continues to tour his famous Outlaw Music Festival, still crisscrosses the country every summer. Fans old and young come to see him, and while his voice is raspier and his movements slower, the magic hasn't vanished. When he sings on the road again, entire arenas rise to their feet. It's not just nostalgia, it's reverence. What shocks many fans today isn't just his persistence, but his resilience. Despite health scares, including emphysema, collapsed lungs, and the toll of decades of smoking marijuana, Willie has outlived almost all of his contemporaries. Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Merle Haggard all gone. Yet Willie remains a lone survivor of an era that defined American music. Financially, he recovered from the IRS disaster, thanks to relentless touring and shrewd business moves. He even became an unlikely face of entrepreneurship, co-founding brands tied to cannabis, biodiesel, and farming causes. Fans who once worried he would die broke now marvel at how he turned ruin into renewal. And then there's his advocacy. Willie Nelson has become as much an activist as an artist. His Farm Aid concerts, started in the 1980s, continue to raise millions for struggling farmers. His outspoken support for marijuana legalization, while once scandalous, now looks almost prophetic in a country where legalization spreads year by year. But there's a bittersweet side too. In interviews, Willie admits to feeling the weight of time. He speaks openly about mortality, about losing friends, about knowing the road ahead is short. Fans see him sitting quietly on his porch, guitar by his side, looking out at the Texas plains. The man who once seemed eternal now feels mortal, fragile, human. And that contrast is what makes his story so powerful. The same man who filled stadiums with wild energy now spends evenings quietly writing, reading, or simply watching the sunset. His life is no longer about conquering charts or breaking records. It's about savoring what's left, honoring what came before, and leaving behind a legacy that will outlive him. For fans, it's hard to take in. Willie Nelson isn't just an artist, he's a piece of American memory. To see him old, frail, yet still carrying the fire, it's shocking, humbling, and unforgettable. Willie Nelson's story isn't just about music. It's about endurance. It's about a man who rose from the dust of Texas fields, conquered the world with nothing but his words and his voice, fell to the brink of ruin, and somehow found a way to stand again. For fans, he's more than a singer. He's a symbol of freedom, rebellion, and resilience. His braids, his battered guitar, his voice that sounds like the wind itself, all of it reminds us of an America that believed in chasing the open road, no matter the what. And yet, the truth is simple. Willie Nelson is human. He's felt heartbreak, he's made mistakes, and he's faced the slow march of age just like everyone else. The man who once seemed immortal is now a reminder that time spares no one. But maybe that's the point. Maybe what makes Willie so beloved is not that he defied time, but that he kept playing through it. He kept singing when his voice cracked. He kept performing when his body ached. He kept showing up because that's what Willie Nelson has always done. So the question isn't just what happened to Willie Nelson. The real question is, what does it mean that he's still here? Still singing, still reminding us of who we were when we first heard On the Road Again. Do you remember? Maybe it was a road trip, the windows down, radio blasting. Maybe it was a dance hall, holding someone you loved. Maybe it was just a scratchy record spinning late at night. Whatever the memory, it's yours, and it's tied to him. And as we watch Willie now, in the twilight of his life, it's impossible not to feel both awe and gratitude. He gave us music that will last forever. He gave us a legend that can't be erased. And for however long he remains on the road, we'll be there singing along. Tell us, what's your memory of a Willie Nelson? Was it the first time you heard Crazy, or the way On the Road Again made you dream of escape? Share it in the comments below and let us know who you want us to cover next. Because legends like Willie remind us of something bigger. Music fades, fame disappears, but the memories we share, they never leave.